Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. Our topic today is the New York State Data Center and demographics. Our guest is Bob Scardamalia. He's our New York State Demographer, and I'd like to meet him and get started and talk about some of the statistical things that you do.
Okay, Richard, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's nice to have you. To get started, I didn't know we had a New York State Demographer, and I know you said the job has changed a lot. But let's back up even before that and talk about the department and what you do and how it fits into state government.
Okay. Well, I work for the State Department of Economic Development. There are a number of different functions of that agency. The primary is to attract business, grow jobs, look at employment and economic issues, try and improve the business climate in New York State, and everything related to that, trying to retain New York businesses, expand New York businesses, attract non-New York businesses, improve international trade, small businesses, minority and women's businesses. We have quite a wide mission, but it all comes down really to improving the economic climate in New York State.
It's kind of nice that many of our state agencies have oriented themselves toward that, because I think if you ask the average person on the street if they'd like us to be wealthier and have more jobs, they would say, "Oh, you're crazy," of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's certainly one of the basic requirements. The difficulty is there's a lot of competition out there, both from other states and from other countries as the world economy changes. So we're constantly scrambling to, do those things, legislative programs like our Empire Zones program and other programs to continually try and improve the climate and stand up to stiff competition in other states.
Great. Now, the data center, what is that today?
The data center is a unit within the Department of Economic Development that I direct, and it's a unit that has actually been around for many, many years, 3 decades, in fact. It's a cooperative program with the U.S. Bureau of the Census. That's where it originated in the late 1970s. The Census Bureau found that they sat on a mountain of data, and it was highly in high demand.
We didn't have an internet back then.
Didn't have an internet back then. These were the days that I'm showing my age, whenever we got data on, very large magnetic tape files, and you needed a room-sized computer in order to process them. But that's exactly the environment the Census Bureau found themselves in. They had a mountain of data. They had a difficult time disseminating it to local governments, the town of Colonie. If they wanted to get census data, it was a very difficult thing to do. So they started this state data center program, an agency in each state that would be a central repository.
That's interesting that it goes back that far, I think.
It does. 1977, I believe it was, they did a pilot program in, I want to say Indiana. It was either Indiana or Kansas. They quickly, within a year, decided that this was something that they needed nationwide, and so New York officially signed our data center agreement with the Census Bureau on April 1st, Census Day,
Is that
1980.
a good date?
That was a good date. The Department of Commerce, which we were previous to that, had kind of always served as that repository of census information. But the data center program formalized the network. It formalized the Census Bureau's delivery of data to each state. So for New York, anything the Census Bureau produces, whether it's demographic data, economic data, survey information, business data, anything for the state of New York, we have access to. And back then, that was an important central point of contact. We operate the program in New York, and virtually every state has a similar model, through a network of affiliate data centers. And here locally, the Capital District Regional Planning Commission
I was wondering about
is
that.
our primary data center affiliate. We also work with the Center for Social and Demographic Analysis at SUNY Albany. So those two agencies right here in the local area are prime prime deliverers and disseminators of census information,
Is
technical resource.
the data is created by the Census Bureau for the most part? Do you get it from other people as well?
Yes and no. The census data itself that comes out every 10 years,
Right.
and population estimates and other survey information, that is a federal Census Bureau product. And so that's the main body of information. We go well beyond that. You know, as an economic development agency, we get data from the State Labor Department, we get data from the Federal Bureau of Economic Analysis, from Agriculture Department, Education Department. So this state data center, even though it is Census Bureau focused, really encompasses a wide
Does it
variety
go
of sources.
international at all?
No, not technically, but I have to say if we had to get Canadian data, we would be able to establish contacts with Statistics Canada or in other countries.
So
we
there are
could use census
informal contacts, or is it a...
Very much informal at that level.
Okay.
But our office, there's an office like mine in all of the 50 states, District of Columbia and the territories, Puerto Rico and all of the territories. So we have a wide national network of experts, and you know, certain states have certain expertise in different areas, and we draw upon that. So it's a nationwide network of some 1,800 organizations that are working with the Census Bureau, focused towards dissemination, but with the internet, that focus has changed dramatically. People get their own data off the internet these days.
All over the place.
And what we end up shifting to is being more involved in some of the census operations, better improving census operations in New York.
So you work with the Bureau of the Census?
Yes, very
And-
regularly,
Okay.
very regularly. Sometimes more regularly than we'd like.
Now, kind of, what's an example of what you do, or how do you use the information? How do you get it to people?
Well, I'll go back to our economic development mission. A unit, our strategic business division, may get an inquiry from a site development consultant or a company that is looking to evaluate various sites to either move a company, set up a location, distribution center, wide variety of things.
Say Semitech from...
Exactly. Target, Walmart, setting up distribution centers. They want to look
LLB.
at transportation networks. Exactly. They want to look at the demographics of the area. They want to look at workforce information. So we will get pulled into that to provide data and information as support. Because, like I said, we're in a competitive environment.
Do they know what information they need? Or how does that work?
Generally, yes. Generally, in fact, in particular, if you're working with a development consultant, they will present us with a very large
very
catalog of information that they'd like to see, some of which is readily available, easy to put together, some of which may not be so readily available.
It sounds like it could be a real challenge.
It often is, and oftentimes, it's not just the demographic data, it's workforce data, it's tax comparisons, it's building cost information, a whole variety of information resources. In our unit, like I said, even though we're focused on census information, we have to have all of those resources at hand to put together a package of information.
So you kind of, people contact you for the most part. They have a project or a problem, and you get involved a little bit like a consultant, and you bring your data and expertise to bear.
That's correct, and oftentimes it's a process of somebody will make an inquiry, whether, used to always be over the telephone. We used to get hundreds and thousands of calls. Now it's most often on the internet. And what you really need to do is establish a contact and probe. Oftentimes somebody has a general idea of what they want.
Okay.
They really don't know what data is out there. And so you have to kind of probe what they want to do, what the result they're trying, or what report or application they're trying to complete, get a sense of what their goal is, and then teach them what data fits into those holes, because most oftentimes people don't understand the limitations of some of the data that we end up working with. And so
You try to
and that's
make something out of sometimes less than would be nice, or?
Well, sometimes you're in that position, but one of the nice things is that we're generally in a position to be pretty objective about the information we're dealing with. And it's one of those areas where you really have to help educate the data user. And that's really one of the substantial areas of change of focus with the data center program. We aren't just disseminating information. We have to teach more about it. We have to try and educate people. The census, how is it taken? Is it appropriate for the use you want to put it to? The 2000 census is 7 years old. Are there other sources that can be used that meet those needs?
So it seems like
more
communication
regularly?
skills become now a big tool.
Yes, they do. And communication and certainly a good understanding of how our
Analysis.
data, two things, analysis certainly because you're helping them interpret results oftentimes, but you really need to understand where data comes from. We kind of have this notion that, and I jokingly call it the USA Today mentality. Every day there's a little box or a little graphic or some little tidbit of information on the front page of USA Today. And that sort of leads people to believe that all of this kind of information is just readily available for all types of areas. So, you know, somebody in the town of Colonie might want a particular piece of information that they see in USA Today, but it's gathered from a national survey, and there's no local information. But yet they want to try and find their interest is piqued, and they want to find a source. And so you work with what data is out there and try and teach them why it doesn't exist for the town of Colonie, what
Right.
other sources might help them out.
So we might need sidewalk data, we might need train traffic through. The Capital District Planning Commission has this wonderful data that I've always found fascinating, and that is the journey to work data.
Correct.
That sounds difficult to come up with, and it doesn't seem like that would be census data. Is that?
It actually is census data.
It is census data.
In the decennial census, one of the sample questionnaires is, what was your place of work? So census is tabulated by residents, where people live, but there's this question on where did you work? And then from that, the detailed workflow information can be derived, and you can look at people in the town of Colonie, where do they work? People who live in Colonie, where do they work? And then say, if you're looking at the city of Albany, how many people from Colonie come into the city? So you can look at that flow in both directions, and that's decennial census information.
Now, the journey to work data seems like something that somebody may have asked for at some point, and people said, wow, that is really neat. Let's keep doing it. It's made out of, like you're saying, then out of several data elements. And now
Yes.
somebody creates out of these elements a chart, and all we now have to do is say journey to work, and up comes
All this wonderful data.
all this.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to come up with new charts that maybe don't exist yet. Is kind of what you're saying with the consulting.
Yes, and many times you are faced with putting together different sources to create a picture that somebody is looking for. One of the interesting things that probably most of your viewers don't know is that every question that is asked in the census is required by law.
Wow.
Somebody isn't sitting in a back room saying, oh, wouldn't it be interesting to know about transportation and commuting data? The Federal Department of Transportation has programs that require that information. And so there is a legal basis for that question being on the census questionnaire. And every one of those questions has to go through the Office of Management and Budget in Congress before they end up actually being on that questionnaire. So we oftentimes get people who say, well, geez, can't you ask that question on the census? And oftentimes, no. It's a lengthy process of testing and you know, legislative requirement,
Well, there has to be
legislative
some
or
way,
program requirement.
other than having somebody sit in a room and say, here are the questions for this year.
If we
There must
did
be a
that,
competition for this.
if we left it open to all of the various parties who are interested, economists, demographers, anyone in the academic world, we'd have a census questionnaire that would be
Take longer
volumes.
than the 10 years it takes to...
Exactly, exactly. So that is a limiting factor, even though much of the information on our census questionnaire gets pretty detailed. All of it is required by law, so there's a legal justification for it being on that questionnaire.
Now to kind of change gears a little bit, when I first started the program, I was thinking in terms of more of the common everyday citizen who uses and sees websites and census information.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've expanded my understanding, and there's an extremely practical aspect of this of economic development, which is why you're in the Department of Economic Development. But there are a lot of sites that a normal person can access.
Mhm.
How do we know where to go? I'm even a librarian, and I have no idea sometimes why I should go to the census, why I should go to the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, why I should go to your site or another site. How do we decide which one's better? I mean, do we just need to ask someone?
Better, I guess, is kind of subjective.
More
Yeah.
useful to our question.
Yeah, oftentimes it will come down to which site is easiest to navigate and which do you find most comfortable.
I see.
And which one delivers the information to you.
And maybe up
easiest.
front, because I know on the Capital District Regional Planning website, there are certain things that are right out there,
Right,
and other things you kind of have to probe for.
yeah. If you know that census information is what you're looking for, and you know that you need very detailed census information, then your likely course is probably directly to the Census Bureau's American Fact Finder
Okay.
system. That system has been in development since well before the 2000 census, and it has grown to be a very effective dissemination means. The caveat is, it takes a little getting used to. It's not always the
Okay.
most intuitive thing. But once you understand the basic structure of geographic search and subject content search, it becomes very powerful, and you
Okay.
can find virtually anything. Capital District Regional Planning Commission, their focus is the Capital District. And so what they want to do is take out of this mountain of census information data that's most relevant to their region.
So for
And
me,
so
that would
often,
be
it's going to be much easier for you to get summary information from the Regional
Right.
Planning Commission than weeding through this mass of census
and
information.
redoing my searches and
Exactly.
refiguring out how to use the website.
Exactly. But if your client wants to compare Capital Region with the location in Illinois or California or somewhere else, then you are faced with, well, how do I find the regional commission in that area?
Okay.
Or do I just go to the Census Bureau's site where I can get it for the entire nation, get comparable information? So for the general user, sometimes it can be a painful process finding
Right.
the most useful location.
Now, if I'm not a general user, now I'm really somebody who is connected to business, which puts it in your
Mhm.
area. When do I call you? What kind of customers do you look for?
We have never sort of had to look for them. They kind of always come to us. We provide services to everything from the school kid looking for data for their report to
Really?
businesses.
So you
doing
would even help the school
site
kid?
consulting. Yeah. You know, that isn't as often as it used to be because of the internet. Those school kids are generally on the web and they're searching.
Better
and
than their
finding
parents,
stuff.
probably.
Better than their parents. I know my kids certainly were. When they get to a level of sophistication in their inquiry that crosses a number of different data sources, and they may find information that's conflicting in those data sources, or things that look like they should be the same. Income data. Income data in the census is different than income data in the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is different than income data from other survey sources. So when they get to the point of having that question, well, which one do I use, which is best for my purpose, then they start to look for other resources. And at that point, we certainly know that our users are becoming much more sophisticated. The questions they're asking are becoming much more complicated because they want to integrate many different data sources. And so we provide, our level of assistance is a much higher level now. It's not just providing an off-the-shelf publication or a quick summary of census information. It's pulling from multiple different sources and oftentimes creating a new value-added product for the client, whether it's a business or whether it's a nonprofit agency, somebody applying for federal or state grant information that needs demographic or economic data.
It's always a problem. I know as a librarian, we used to always worry that people didn't ask questions or didn't know the right question or didn't know that there was a question involved in their problem.
Yeah.
You know, they have a situation maybe. Maybe their business isn't doing well. I just wish that there was some way for that person to recognize that you might have part of the answer if they could formulate a question.
That's why we end up trying to help people formulate their questions. You know, they'll come with that vague notion of what problem they want to solve, and we have to determine whether there's a data solution. to
Do
the
organizations
problem or
like
not.
SCORE and the Chamber take take advantage of some of your services when they're trying to help their clients?
I think the answer is yes. Not so much directly in that do we get a lot of calls from the chamber or SCORE, because we don't. They are heavy users of the information.
Ah.
And so my suspicion
they're getting pretty
is
good
that
at
they
it.
are getting good at it.
Uh-huh.
They've got a
Great.
variety of sources.
Because you're only one person.
Exactly, exactly. And there aren't enough replicates of me in the office to be able to do this. So that's where the internet has been a real facilitator of information access. One of the dangers is, maybe danger is a little too strong. One of the things that makes it a little bit more confusing is, do I always know that I can trust the data that I'm getting off a particular site? Is it the most up-to-date? Are they explaining the limitations of the data source to me? Do I recognize that I need to understand limitations of data to get proper answers or conclusions? And that's where I think probably we all need to do a better marketing in information awareness, because I'm not sure that is being handled as well as it
Could you
needs
give
to
an
be.
example of maybe how someone
I'll give
doesn't
you a
understand
great example. And it's one that is relevant today and going to be even more important. One of the things we batted back and forth in planning here is something called the American Community Survey.
Right.
This is a survey by the Census Bureau that is ongoing today. It's a monthly survey. There are probably, I'm sure there are people in the Capital District who have gotten a survey form.
Yeah, if it's monthly.
This month. It's being taken monthly nationwide. It's 250,000 households every month are being surveyed. The American Community Survey is going to replace all of the detailed information from the decennial census. So we'll now have that whole body of data every year. The confusing piece is, as a survey, it is subject to a variety of survey sampling error,
Right.
a range of accuracy. Well, most people, when they're looking for data, want a number. They don't want to know that the median income is between this value and this value. They want a number. Their application asks
They need
for
to
a
plug it
number.
in.
They need to plug it in somewhere. And so it presents for us a great challenge to educate people whenever they see a number published that that number is a statistical estimate. And there's a range of statistical estimates that are just as valid as that number. So if I'm comparing median income in the town of Colonie to the city of Albany and the town of Guilderland, well, I better understand what this range of error is, because otherwise I may well misinterpret.
Is
the
there also a
results.
problem, it strikes me, with statistics in general here? Because if someone doesn't understand a confidence interval, confounding variables, factor analysis, you can go off thinking you have the reason, but there's something else causing it. You may fix this one thing that's correlated,
Mhm.
but you still have the same problem.
You've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. And so that argues for a general raising of the level of knowledge about where our statistics come from. Because it's not just census. I mean, it's a whole world of, every day you're bombarded by information in the media. I always used to talk with a library class at SUNY Albany and talk about this information, and I used an example of listening to National Public Radio. Every week you get a rundown of the upcoming economic statistics that are coming out, unemployment rates and producer price indexes and all these sorts of things. All of them are collected in a particular manner to solve a particular problem, and they all have particular collection issues around them. And so on unemployment rate, for instance, every month when we get it nationally or the state number, well, it's an estimate. There's a range of confidence around that estimate. And so if you look at 0.1% change and put too much stock in that, well, 0.1% change is well within the sample estimate error. And so it really statistically is no change, but we put a lot of weight on that seeming.
So then the question has to be asked, is in this case this meaningful?
Exactly.
Significant?
Exactly. And so the user of that information has to be constantly aware of, and I guess anybody should always do this, of questioning the information that they have. Do they understand it enough to really know what it's telling them?
And then the issue of significant, it can be significant statistically, but not significant to me.
Right, right. Just whether it's a good number or not, does it solve my problem?
Right,
Does it answer
right.
the question I'm
Yeah.
yeah, that's an ongoing
Now, when
problem.
they went to, I don't remember when, maybe you didn't say, when the community survey replaced, or will replace,
Yeah.
some of the census questions, I remember in the past there was a big discussion, maybe discussion is a light word for it, a fight, over whether we could use statistical methods for the census because the law says count everybody.
Okay. Two separate issues. The issue surrounding the sampling for the decennial census was raised, it gets raised every decennial census. And the basic issue is, we know we don't count everybody. Census knows they don't count everybody. They try their darndest. It's a massive effort to count the population, but there is always some portion that is difficult to find. and
People under
difficult to
bridges,
count.
homeless, prisons.
Exactly, exactly. And the question was, can the census be statistically adjusted to account for that population? And there are statistical methods that
Because it was wrong.
attempt to do it.
We count everything, but we didn't.
Yeah, we counted everything we found, but we know we didn't find everything.
Right.
So how can we estimate what we didn't find
Right.
and add it in?
And can we be allowed to do that?
Yeah, and the constitutional question from the Supreme Court was that no. For purposes of congressional reapportionment, it is the count.
Oh.
What you find. You cannot statistically modify that count for those purposes. That decision was just in regard to congressional reapportionment. It still left open the door of whether states could adjust the data for their state or local redistricting. Bottom line, it comes down to a very messy statistical and data problem because each individual small census block has to be adjusted. And statistically, the Census Bureau just got to the point where they said our methods are not robust enough for us to know that we're improving every block. They may improve some,
Right.
but they may make some worse. So
we don't use
in
the
answer,
census.
we use the census data as it is published and as it is the official count from the Census Bureau, and there is no statistical adjustment to that.
Okay. And it struck me when you said that the census is not a good way anyway to find out how many illegal immigrants we have.
No. There are numbers of
Sometimes you need a
illegal
different tool.
populations. Yeah, and those tools are generally different methods of estimating because there's no single data source that captures them.
Now, the census is coming up, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
Is there anything relevant that people should think about in terms of that? I guess 2007 going on 2008, it is getting close.
It's getting very close. In fact, now is the time when local governments have the opportunity to be involved in the most meaningful way possible. So I just got back from doing a training session in Catskill yesterday for local governments because what the Census Bureau has invited local governments to do right now is to review their address information. So if you think of the town of Colonie and every residential address in the town, Census Bureau is in the process of developing this, what they call master address file. It's the universe that they use to take the census from.
Okay.
And they're giving local governments the opportunity to review it. Look at the address file. It's confidential information, but look at the address file, see if it's accurate. Do we have streets named properly? Are houses numbered properly? Did we miss a subdevelopment? What we've found is there are lots and lots of different types of hidden addresses.
And there can be a lot of money involved in not
Absolutely.
finding.
There's money and there's representation involved in completeness of count. So if that garage in back of my house has been converted to an apartment,
I mean,
but it's
good
not on the
example.
census master address file, the likelihood is very high that that garage and the residents of it are going to get missed.
Nothing will
If
get
I-
mailed and nobody will come knocking.
That's exactly right. If that address isn't on that file, census has no reason to believe that there's something out there. So local governments have the opportunity right now to look at that list and add to it, make sure that everything is complete. So it is the most technically oriented and most valuable program for the Census Bureau to work with local governments in. So it has to happen now. That program ends by end of March next year,
2008.
2008.
Okay, so it is
They just received...
11th hour here.
Yeah, The town supervisors and mayors just received invitations the end of August to participate. So now is the time when they have to register, request their data, and begin the process.
Now, if a
of review.
citizen has added an address,
Mhm.
would it be helpful to the government to have them say, by the way, we have an apartment, or is that something that they wouldn't want to do because now maybe they think it's worth more money and they shouldn't have done that?
That's another yes and no yes and no answer. Certainly, it is advantageous for the census and all
Okay.
of the results
So
of the
maybe
census
that's
for that unit to be identified. In theory, when somebody does that type of conversion, they go to the town or the village and they get a building permit to be able to do that, and that shows up in some official record.
And so that should be added.
And so it should be added, and that's a source that the town or village could use to then compare to the census information. In reality, we all know that that doesn't always happen, and so if that unit that's been created is an undocumented or unauthorized unit, that becomes especially difficult to find. And so, yes, on one hand, it's in the person's interest to say, oh, I have a separate unit in my house. On the other hand, they're probably reluctant to do that if it isn't already captured in
So we're not
official rolls.
recommending either way, we're just giving information
We're just
here.
giving information. This is the situation that exists.
Right.
And we're trying to get the most accurate
Right.
and complete count possible.
We're really about out of time. I don't want to miss out on allowing somebody to find you if they have a data question, a business issue that they think might be solved with data. Could we tell them how to find you?
We can. Or if you want to mail something, our address is the Department of Economic Development, 30 South Pearl Street, Albany, 12245.
We'll put it up on the screen.
Okay. Our general phone number is 518-292-5300. And I guess I could give you my email address, although it's a lot of letters, and I don't know, you may want
Well, we
to put
can
it up
put
on
it
the
up,
screen.
yeah.
So my email address is rscardamalia@empire.state.ny.us.
Very good. Thank you. This is especially interesting to me. I hope it's
Good.
interesting to everyone else.
Good. It'll be my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. I want to invite you to our next show and wish you a great week. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.